let's talk about my favorite post-apocalyptic shows that I love to binge watch when I'm on the road. If you're a prepper, a survivalist, or anyone who just loves to be prepared, these shows are definitely for you because they give you so many tips and tricks and things that we may not have even thought of before. The first show that I really love is Jericho. Jericho follows a small town in Kansas that has to fend for themselves after they see a mushroom clouds in the distance. Now, nuclear war is definitely one of the biggest apocalypse events that can actually happen, and there's so much to prepare for when it comes to dealing with war and any remnants of war. And what I really love about this show is that they really go into depth and follow the storylines about how this family and this entire town tries to stay together and band together when they are actually cut off from the entire world when it comes down to electricity, electronics, and they're pretty much left to fend for themselves. And it's actually pretty crazy to think about, that we may have to deal with some sort of war within our lifetime, but it's happened before. We're pretty sure it's going to happen again. This show really goes into depth to show the different emotions and the different types of reactions we can expect if there was to be a war. So I really love this show just for the fact that it shows a different side of the apocalypse and a different side to how we can be better prepared, especially if you are in a town that is a small town. A lot of us live in the cities, but this actually follows how people who are, further out in the middle of nowhere prepare, and how we can even help each other prepare, or things and ideas that I hadn't even thought about being prepared. So definitely check out Jericho. My next favorite show is The Colony. The Colony is a little bit different, and it's actually in a completely different setting. It's based out of Los Angeles, and it follows the storyline of a family who is actually dealing with a new alien invasion that has came to colonize our planet. I know alien invasions and post-apocalyptic shows are a hit or miss for some of us. It really just depends if you believe that we have neighbors out there in our galaxy that at some point may come to visit us, whether friendly or not. However, what I like about this show is that they go into depth about how these people were prepared or weren't prepared, and how they actually dealt with the colonization from another species, another race coming to our planet, and how they actually got stuck with what they were prepared and not so prepared with, and dealing with the fact that resources were no longer in abundance and resources were no longer accessible by us, and they had to deal with obtaining and trading and having to find a way through the colonization with the little allowance that they were given by the alien species and by their collaborators. So it's actually a pretty interesting show, even though, like I said, it's a little bit different. This actually was a very interesting storyline to follow along with, especially towards the later seasons, because regardless of the storyline, there's tons of things that we can actually learn in how they dealt with the colonization, the lack of preparedness, and even utilize their own skills and the things that they knew how to barter, and all of these things that they utilized to their advantage. So it's actually a great way to come up with ideas about our own preparedness and what we can utilize to barter in the future. So make sure that you check out The Colony. Now, this next show, I was so sad that they only had one season, and this show's name is Containment, and it was based out of Atlanta, and it's a show that follows a epidemic outbreak that causes some citizens within Atlanta to be quarantined. I know that doesn't sound too far off from the COVID-19 pandemic. However, I think this actually has a lot of different twists and turns and things that we didn't think about when it comes down to being quarantined. And even though with the COVID-19 outbreak and the COVID-19 pandemic, our government dealt with it much differently because it was on a much larger scale. The good thing about this show actually talks about what it would be like if they had to quarantine a small area or a small radius of a major urban city, which is completely different from, what I talked about in the other shows. And these people had to be quarantined within their city and could not leave a certain area, and they were completely blocked in with this virus that was extremely contagious. It's really kind of scary to think about that, there's viruses out there, and like we found out recently with the pandemic, there's viruses out there that can mutate and change and be catastrophic if they were not to be contained properly. So definitely make sure that you check out Containment, because like I said, even though it was one season, it was totally binge worthy and completely interesting to watch it all developed. I truly hope eventually they come out with another season. A similar show is actually the show called Between, which airs on Netflix. They have 2 seasons, and this storyline is a little bit different, even though it is about outbreaks and about being within containment within a city. But the storyline is very different in the fact that only people who are a certain age actually survive. The virus that they deal with in this show is actually fatal, and it kills off pretty much the adult population, and it leaves anyone who's under 22 alive. It's a little bit different, like I said. However, it's also very interesting to watch how these young people actually dealt with, what they were given with the situation at hand. I've always said that young people are super resourceful, and I feel like a lot of the ideas that they come up with on this show was very unique and interesting. Young people are a little bit bolder in the things that they try. Young people are a little bit more fearless. It actually had a completely different perspective, and it's completely unlike any other show I've actually watched that's based on a post-apocalyptic scale. The next show that I want to talk about is The 100. They actually have 7 seasons in total on Netflix. And this show actually takes place in a very distant future, and it has a very sci-fi take on a nuclear Armageddon, destroying civilization and destroying life on Earth as we know it. Survivors actually lived in outer space on an ark and had to eventually come back to Earth due to their dwindling resources on their ark. It's actually a very, youth-based show. Now, even though, of course, there's adults on the show as well, it's a very different show because they actually send out 100 of their youth who were actually juvenile offenders down to planet Earth in order to see if it's actually survivable. Now, it's very interesting to watch, these youth try to battle it out and survive on Earth with the little survival skills that they were taught. And then they're also surprised with the fact that they weren't the only survivors, that in fact some people had survived on the planet, and they came down and ended up having to battle it out with the people who were the real survivors of planet Earth. Like I said, a very different perspective, very different show. However, in this show, you do see a lot more people surviving just from what they have and the tools that they have, and they find out in nature, in the woods, whether it comes to hunting, fishing, gathering, and actually having to survive and basically being in an all-out war with the survivors on planet Earth for the little resources that they were able to find. It is a very different perspective, and like I said, it's very sci-fi and very out in the distant future, and it's not for everyone, but there is definitely a lot of tools that you can pick up from how these youth survive being sent down to Earth basically to die, not even knowing if the air was toxic, if it was survivable. There's just a lot of things that, a lot of different perspectives, a lot of different takes, and it was definitely very interesting to watch and binge out on. The next show that I really like to watch is The Rain. The Rain is actually an extremely different take on a viral outbreak. It follows the storyline of a family that has to bunker down because of a virus that is carried in the rain. So pretty much everywhere that it rains, you can become exposed. So their whole family had to bunker down for a period of 6 years in a bunker. And once they dwindled and ran out of resources, they had to come out and figure out how they were gonna survive on their own and figure out what was left, what resources were left, and how to carry on without being exposed to this deadly virus that pretty much can infect anyone and everything, including animals. But it was definitely very interesting to watch the different takes of viral outbreaks and how they can be transmitted. This was completely unique. The show was completely unique. So it's a very different type of show. It definitely has a different take. But of course, this is also a show that follows a group of young people, which I don't know why. A lot of these shows actually follow young people when it comes to post-apocalyptic scenarios. But I also do think that it's very interesting to watch, and it has a totally different take on, viruses, and the way that the virus is transmitted in the rain was super unique. I've never seen that in a show before. And of course, seeing a family that's so prepared, and there's so many twists and turns on this show. It's actually very interesting to watch. So check it out if you are looking for a binge-worthy show. Another show that I really like is To the Lake. Now, this show is based out of Moscow, so yes, it is translated into English. Luckily, the voices are translated, so you don't have to read the entire thing. However, it actually is extremely interesting, and it follows a family, a blended family that is trying to escape Moscow because of a deadly virus that's basically killing all of the citizens of Moscow. So the family actually sets off on a long, treacherous drive and bug out essentially onto this hunting lodge that's supposed to be isolated, and they're seeking safety. There is only one season of this show so far, and it was released before the pandemic, so it's going to be interesting to see the new seasons that come up on this show, because I actually truly enjoyed this show a lot, and it did show me a lot of different scenarios that you may be faced with when you have to bug out. Especially for me, who I travel and live in a converted bus, this show was particularly interesting to me because of the different circumstances that the family had to deal with when they bugged out and when they were trying to get to their bug out location. So I actually really enjoyed this show, and I hope that they do come out with more seasons, because they kind of left me on the edge of my seat and wanting more. So definitely check out To the Lake. Now, along with fungal and viral outbreaks, there is another show that is called The Last of Us on HBO Max. Now, I truly enjoyed this show, and to me, honestly, I believe that preppers and survivalists are really going to enjoy this show too, just because of the fact that they literally have to venture out and bug out into the middle of nowhere in order to find safety and find refuge and find their families. But it is a very interesting take on viral outbreaks and fungi, actually. And there's different funguses in the world that do exist now, that if they were to evolve, something like this could actually truly happen. And we all know that with pandemics, we recently learned that they can definitely mutate, evolve, grow. So something like this is actually not too far-fetched, and I do believe that this is going to be a favorite for a lot of you preppers and survivalists out there. It's super interesting, and it has so many survival tips and tools that you can definitely use when you're bugging out. A lot of them bug out on foot, so it's definitely a different take. It's definitely a different perspective, but I actually can't wait for the next season of this show, and I'm super excited. It's a newer show, so it was just released in 2023, so there's only one season right now, and I'm definitely waiting for the second. So make sure that you check out all of these shows and let me know what you think down in the comments.